The rain on Pandora Prime fell in sheets of silver, washing over the dense jungle canopy and creating rivers of water that flowed down ancient tree trunks. Commander Marcus Chun had been walking for 3 days now, his survival suit torn and his emergency rations completely gone. The crash had killed his entire crew, and he was the only survivor of the research vessel Aurora. Marcus stumbled through the undergrowth, his body weak from hunger and exhaustion. The indigenous people of this world, the Naivari, were known to be suspicious of outsiders. The Galactic Council had warned all human explorers to avoid contact with them. They were a proud species, tall and blue-skinned, with bioluminescent markings that glowed in the darkness. They had refused to join the interstellar community and kept to their traditional ways. He collapsed against a massive tree root, his vision blurring. The rain soaked through what remained of his protective gear, and he shivered uncontrollably. Marcus closed his eyes and prepared himself for the end. He had traveled across galaxies, seen wonders that most humans could only dream of, and now he would die alone on an alien world. The sound of footsteps made him open his eyes. Standing before him was a Naivari woman. She was tall, at least 7 feet, with skin the color of the evening sky. Her eyes were large and golden, and the patterns on her skin pulsed with soft blue light. She wore traditional clothing made from woven plant fibers, and her long dark hair was decorated with small glowing flowers. Marcus expected her to run away or perhaps attack him. Humans were not welcome here. But instead, she knelt down beside him and studied his face with curiosity. She said something in her native language, her voice musical and strange. He shook his head weakly. His translator had been destroyed in the crash. The Naivari woman seemed to understand. She reached out and touched his forehead gently, checking his temperature. Her hand was warm against his cold skin. Then she stood up and gestured for him to follow her. Marcus tried to stand, but his legs gave out. The woman caught him before he could fall, supporting his weight with surprising strength. She spoke again, her tone softer now, almost comforting. Though he could not understand her words, her meaning was clear. She was offering to help him. They walked through the jungle for what felt like hours, though it was probably much less. The woman half-carried Marcus through the rain, never complaining, never stopping to rest. Finally, they arrived at a small village hidden among the giant trees. The structures were built into the living wood itself, with glowing vines providing soft illumination. The other Naivari watched them with suspicion and fear. Children hid behind their parents, and warriors reached for their weapons. The woman who had found Marcus spoke rapidly to them, her voice firm and commanding. After a long discussion, the crowd parted to let them through. She brought him to her home, a cozy dwelling high in the branches of an ancient tree. Inside, there was a fire burning in a central hearth, and the warmth immediately began to seep into Marcus's frozen bones. The woman helped him sit down on a pile of soft furs and then busied herself with something near the fire. Marcus watched her through half-closed eyes as she moved around the small space. She prepared something in a clay pot, adding various plants and what looked like pieces of dried meat. The smell that soon filled the room was incredible. It reminded him of something he could not quite place. When the food was ready, the woman poured some of the hot liquid into a wooden bowl and brought it to him. She knelt before him and held out the bowl with both hands, a gesture that seemed ceremonial somehow. Steam rose from the surface, carrying that familiar yet alien scent. Marcus took the bowl with trembling hands. He looked at the woman, and she nodded encouragingly. He raised the bowl to his lips and drank. The soup was simple, just broth and vegetables and meat. But to Marcus, who had eaten nothing but synthetic food packets for months, who had lost everything in the crash, who had been preparing to die alone in the rain, it was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. And then the memories came. He remembered his grandmother's kitchen on Earth, the smell of chicken soup cooking on the stove. He remembered being sick as a child, and his mother sitting beside his bed, feeding him warm broth until he felt better. He remembered his first mission in space, when his crewmates had celebrated his birthday with a surprise meal that one of them had somehow managed to prepare in the tiny galley of their ship. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He could not stop them. Years of training had taught him to control his emotions, to be strong and stoic in all situations. But this simple act of kindness had broken through all his defenses. The Naivari woman looked alarmed. She spoke quickly, reaching out to touch his face, clearly worried that she had done something wrong. Marcus shook his head and tried to smile through his tears. He pointed to the soup and then to his heart. Then he bowed his head in gratitude. The woman seemed to understand. Her expression soft, and she sat back on her heels, watching him with those large golden eyes. There was something like wonder in her gaze, as if she was seeing something she had never seen before. In the days that followed, Marcus slowly recovered his strength. The woman, whose name he learned was Tianara, taught him basic words in her language. He in turn tried to teach her some human phrases, though she found the harsh sounds of his speech amusing. She would laugh, a sound like wind chimes, and try again. The other villagers remained wary of him, but they no longer reached for weapons when he appeared. Some of the children even grew bold enough to approach him, fascinated by his strange pale skin and his odd way of walking. Marcus made toys for them out of sticks and vines, simple things that spun in the wind or made funny noises. The children's laughter gradually won over their parents. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Tianara asked him a question. Through a combination of gestures and the few words he had learned, Marcus understood that she wanted to know why he had cried when she gave him the soup. He thought about how to answer. How could he explain to her what that moment had meant? How could he convey the weight of human history, all the suffering and joy and love that his species had experienced over thousands of years? Marcus began to tell her about Earth. He described the oceans and the mountains, the cities that reached toward the sky, and the quiet villages that dotted the countryside. He told her about war and peace, about love and loss, about the countless generations of humans who had lived and died on that small blue planet. He told her about how humans had learned to cook food over fire, how they had shared meals with family and friends throughout all of history. He explained that offering food to a stranger was one of the most sacred things a human could do. It meant welcome. It meant safety. It meant that you were no longer alone. When she had given him that bowl of soup, Marcus said she had connected herself to every human grandmother who had ever fed a hungry child, every mother who had nursed a sick loved one back to health, every stranger who had offered bread to a traveler on the road. She had participated in a tradition older than civilization itself. Tianara listened in silence. When he finished speaking, she was quiet for a long time. Then she told him something that changed everything. Among her people, she said, sharing food with a stranger was forbidden. It was considered dangerous and wasteful, a betrayal of the community. Resources were scarce, and every mouth had to earn its own portion. She had broken this law when she brought him here and fed him. Marcus asked why she had done it. Tianara looked into the fire. She said that when she found him in the rain, broken and dying, something had stirred inside her. She had looked into his strange flat eyes and seen not a threat, but a being in pain. She had heard a voice inside her that told her to help, even though everything she had been taught said otherwise. She did not understand this voice, but she had followed it anyway. Marcus realized then that he was witnessing something extraordinary. This woman, this member of a species that humanity barely understood, had discovered compassion for herself. She had taken a leap of faith that most humans would have found difficult. The Council of Elders summoned them both the next morning. Tianara stood accused of breaking sacred law. The punishment, Marcus learned with horror, was exile. She would be cast out from her people, forced to survive alone in the wilderness. Marcus asked to speak. The elders were reluctant, but curiosity won over tradition. They allowed the strange creature from the stars to address them. He stood before the assembled village and told them about humanity. He told them about how his species had once been divided into countless warring tribes, each suspicious of the others. He told them about the slow and painful process by which humans had learned to see each other as family. He told them about the mistakes his people had made and the lessons they had learned. And then he told them about kindness. He explained that among humans, the willingness to help a stranger was considered the highest virtue. It was what separated civilization from savagery. Every great human society had been built on the foundation of people caring for each other, even when it was difficult, even when it was dangerous. Tianara had shown him this kindness, Marcus said. She had saved his life at the risk of her own. In doing so, she had proven that the Naivari were not so different from humans after all. Both species were capable of compassion. Both species could choose love over fear. The elders debated for hours. In the end, they reached an unprecedented decision. Tianara would not be exiled. Instead, the law itself would be examined. Perhaps, they said, it was time for the Naivari to reconsider some of their ancient traditions. When Marcus finally left the village, a rescue ship having finally located his emergency beacon, half the community came to see him off. The children clung to his legs and cried. The warriors who had once threatened him now clasped his hands in friendship. Tianara walked with him to the edge of the village. They stood together in the golden morning light, neither wanting to say goodbye. Marcus pulled off the one possession he had managed to salvage from the crash. It was a small metal pendant in the shape of Earth, a gift from his grandmother when he first left for space. He pressed it into Tianara's hands. She looked at it, then at him, her eyes shimmering with emotion. He told her that on his world, when someone saved your life, you were connected to them forever. She was now part of his family. She was now part of humanity's story. The rescue ship rose into the sky, carrying Marcus away from Pandora Prime. He watched through the window as the jungle grew smaller and smaller, until it was just a patch of green on a blue and white sphere. But he knew he would return. And he knew that when he did, things would be different. One bowl of soup had changed the course of two civilizations. One act of kindness had bridged the gap between the stars. And somewhere in the universe, a blue-skinned woman held a small metal pendant in her hands and smiled, knowing that she was no longer alone.